the full House of Representatives is scheduled to hold its first formal vote on the impeachment inquiry process. That's going to happen today in Washington. Nancy Cordes is standing by with us from Capitol Hill to talk a little bit more about this. So, Nancy, what's the significance of this vote?
Well, Anne-Marie, it causes everyone to go on the record for the first time on this impeachment inquiry. It lays out some procedures for the public phase of the inquiry. It has near universal Democratic support, so it is expected to pass. And it is coming as we learn some new details about the handling of the summary of the very controversial call that is at the heart of this probe.
Lieutenant Colonel Alex Vindman, the top Ukraine advisor at the White House, testified that he was so disturbed by the pressure President Trump put on the Ukrainian president in July that he rushed to White House lawyer John Eisenberg's office after the July 25th call. According to the Washington Post, Vindman told Eisenberg that what the president did was wrong. Eisenberg then proposed moving the call summary to a highly classified server and restricting access to it. Eisenberg is one of three major figures who congressional investigators want to hear from next week. Another is the president's former national security advisor, John Bolton. According to one former White House official, Bolton used the term drug deal to describe the pressure put on Ukraine to investigate the president's campaign rival, Joe Biden.
If indeed what we have learned is true, that he thought this was a drug deal, he thought that Mr. Giuliani was a hand grenade, then tell the American people.
The president's top Russia advisor, Tim Morrison, will sit for a highly anticipated deposition today. In a surprise move last night, the White House announced Morrison was stepping down to pursue other opportunities, and that he had been considering leaving for some time.
Cutting ties with the administration makes it less likely that the president could compel him not to show.
The top U.S. diplomat in Ukraine, Bill Taylor, testified last week that Morrison had warned him the president doesn't want to provide any military assistance at all to Ukraine. Taylor said he found that extremely troubling.
The president will be completely excluded from the Intelligence Committee procedures.
Lawmakers debated into the night over the rules that will govern the public phase of this inquiry.
What you have set forth here is not an open and fair process.
We can shape our impeachment investigation however we like.
All right, so Nancy Cordes is standing by, but I'm also joined by CBSN legal contributor Keir Dougall to break this down. But Nancy, I'm going to start with you. You said that this vote is probably going to pass. It's probably going to pass along party lines. So give me a sense of what this means politically for the two parties, for the representatives. They're sending a message out with this vote.
Right. Democrats, by and large, support the impeachment inquiry. A few remaining holdouts announced last night that they were going to support the inquiry. So I do think you'll see near universal support from Democrats. What we'll be watching to see is whether any Republicans at all vote yes, regardless, because Democrats control the House. They have the numbers, and this resolution will pass. Republicans say the resolution doesn't do nearly enough to give them the kind of rights that the minority should have in an impeachment proceeding. They say they don't have the right to call their own witnesses, that the president's rights are very poorly defined in this document. They want to know more. And so all the fighting that we saw before this vote about how this inquiry was illegitimate, Democrats saying that Republicans were just looking for a reason to stonewall, that same fight is going to continue after this vote as well.
Right, because it was the Republicans that were saying that, this was a break in what has happened in the past because there had not been a vote. They were pushing for the vote, but now it's sort of the details of the vote is what they're probably going to be criticizing.
Exactly. They say that in previous impeachment proceedings that the minority had, had much more clearly defined rights, that they were able to call their own witnesses, et cetera, et cetera. Democrats say, look, the rules don't require us to give you that. And they argue that Republicans, if they had that right, would only go down side alleys and look for ways to distract from the central issue here, which is the president pressuring Ukraine to investigate a campaign rival. They would look to bring in witnesses who had nothing to do with that. That's the Democratic argument, and that's why they say that they don't owe Republicans the right to bring in whoever they want to testify publicly.
So, Keir, the thing about the whole impeachment process is that there's a little bit making it up as they go along, right? Sort of based on what things that have happened before, but there's a lot of leeway. And so now, if this vote passes, which it probably will, we'll have sort of the rules of engagement to continue this investigation. What does that mean for the inquiry?
So you're right. There is a lot of play in these rules, and the Constitution doesn't specify any particular procedures like in the level of detail that we're seeing now. But there have been some historical precedents, and so you'll see now if these rules are passed, the president will, President's Counsel will have a role in the investigation. Will be able to suggest arguments, make objections. The Republican ranking member will have an opportunity if there's a desire to subpoena other evidence and witnesses. They will have an opportunity to request those subpoenas. It'll have to be concurred with by the Democrats. So the Democrats will keep, a veto, some control on this.
Because thus far, the Republicans haven't had the option of bringing their own witnesses before the committees.
I believe that's correct. What they have had, and what we haven't seen in all of the objections about the process, is the Republicans have had members in these depositions, in these closed-door hearings. So so they have participated, just not in the way that perhaps they would have fully liked. So, but a lot of these objections that Nancy just really described so articulately, those seem to be directed probably more properly towards the trial phase, which will occur in the Senate. We've got several ifs now. If this articles of impeachment are passed, then there would proceed to be a trial in the Senate, and that's where a lot of these objections about calling witnesses and having much more control over the president's defense would have more power.
Right. Well, I think what people need to understand when it comes to this vote is that we're still at the investigatory stage.
Correct.
Right. So there's a long way to go.
Correct.
Yet. Still, does this put pressure on the president? I mean, there's the possibility that some of these hearings will be public now, and so we'll all be able to see and hear what these witnesses are saying.
So almost as now a defense lawyer, former prosecutor, now a defense lawyer, you almost have to be careful what you wish for, because this strategy can become very risky, right? So now the president has the opportunity to advance defenses in this investigative phase and to make objections. Well, unless those objections are a slam dunk, what that does is it allows the investigators here, the Democrats, to go out and find out if they're valid, find out if they're sustainable. And so if you assert a defense that's really, sounds good but isn't really going to get you across the finish line, you're giving the Democrats an opportunity to go out and find the evidence that disproves it and undermines it.
Right.
So I'm going to be interested to see how, having complained so bitterly about the process, how actively engaged the Democrats, rather the Republicans, and even President Trump's advocates are in the process.
So Nancy, meantime, as the House prepares for this vote, the inquiry continues to sort of grind on. And you mentioned in your story that the president's top Russia advisor, Tim Morrison, is expected to testify today. What do we think we're going to hear from him, and how significant is his testimony?
Well, Democrats have been very interested in hearing from him because he really had a bird's eye view to a lot of the back and forth over Ukraine. He was a deputy to John Bolton. He is someone who is known to be quite conservative himself. So the Democratic view is that if even someone like that is willing to confirm details that they've heard from career foreign service officers and the like, that will bolster their case. And so, we'll have to see what it is that Morrison has to say. What's so surprising here is the timing of the White House announcing last night. This announcement didn't come from Morrison himself. It came from the White House that he was going to be stepping down. He only stepped into his most recent role at the NSC in July. But now he is leaving, the White House says, to pursue other opportunities. They say it's something that he has wanted to do for a while. But the fact that he would either choose to leave or get pushed out, we don't know. Maybe we'll get more details today. Right before he comes in to testify is interesting. He isn't the first person who we've seen do this. We also saw a top State Department official and a top advisor to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo step down after decades with the State Department right before he testified. And ostensibly, one of the reasons he did that was so that he could testify freely and openly without any concern about what the reaction would be in the administration.
Yeah, we've seen a handful of people announce that they were leaving rather abruptly. Someone else who did that was National Security Advisor John Bolton before all of this started. So now,
and Kurt Volker.
Exactly, yes. So now lawmakers really want to talk to John Bolton, especially after we've had a couple of people testify that he seemed really bothered by what he saw going on. He called what Rudy Giuliani was doing over there, a drug deal that he didn't want to get messed up in. So what are you hearing about Bolton, and are you hearing anything from his team about him testifying?
So that has been one of the big parlor games here on Capitol Hill, is to try to figure out what the chances are that John Bolton will actually show up and testify behind closed doors. Well, we got a big clue last night. His lawyer told CBS News that he won't come in and testify voluntarily, but that his lawyer is standing by to accept a subpoena if one is issued. That's not unusual. We have seen that happen before from people who are willing to testify, but they really need that friendly subpoena, if you will, so that they can say, look, I had no choice. I had to come in and do this. And Democrats will be all too happy to issue that subpoena to Bolton because, he is something of a wild card. He is someone who frequently clashed with the president. He's outspoken, he doesn't mince words, and they really want to hear what his view was of all this, because we've heard from several other witnesses who describe Bolton's reaction to this whole Ukraine mess. It was not favorable, and so they'd want to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, and we remember when he left, he sort of pushed back via Twitter on the way his departure was being characterized, and he did it really quick, which gave us a little bit of an indication of, how the relationship may have frayed a little bit between him and the president. We're guessing here, though. Nancy, Keir, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we're going to be following the developments on Capitol Hill with you throughout the day. As we told you, right now, lawmakers are getting ready to debate and then vote on a set of procedures and rules for the next phase of the impeachment inquiry. And as always, you can follow along with the latest updates in the impeachment inquiry at cbsnews.com/impeachment.